Rain fell on the broken glass scattered around Lucy's crashed research pod. She had been on this strange planet for 3 weeks now, and every day felt like a test of survival. The world around her was nothing like Earth. Purple trees stretched toward a yellow sky, and creatures she had never seen before moved through the thick forest. Lucy pressed her back against a large rock and tried to stay quiet. She could hear them again, the dragons. They made sounds that seemed almost like music, but deeper and more frightening than any song she knew. The first time she saw one, her heart nearly stopped. They were huge, with scales that changed colors like lights on a Christmas tree, and wings that could block out the sun. Her research team had been studying distant planets when their ship broke down. They crash-landed here, and within hours, 3 of her friends were dead. The dragons had attacked without warning, breathing fire that turned metal into puddles and rocks into dust. The survivors scattered into the forest, and Lucy had been alone ever since. But something strange had happened 2 days ago. While hiding behind some crystal formations near what looked like a training ground, Lucy had seen something that changed everything. The dragons were not just monsters. They were teachers, and they had children. The baby dragons were about the size of horses, much smaller than the adults, but still impressive. Their scales were brighter, shifting through colors faster as they learned to fly under the watchful eyes of their elders. Lucy had been fascinated despite her fear. As a scientist, she could not help but observe and learn. She had named the teacher Elder Blue because of his dark blue scales that sparkled with silver patterns. He was patient but firm with the young ones, showing them how to glide on air currents and how to land without crashing. The babies tried their best, sometimes succeeding and sometimes tumbling in ways that would have been funny if Lucy was not so scared. One of the baby dragons had scales that glowed brighter than the others. Lucy called him Bright. Another was almost black and moved like a shadow. She named him Dark. There was one who seemed more curious than afraid, always looking around at everything. Curious seemed like a good name. The smallest one always tried the hardest tricks, even though he often failed. Lucy thought of him as Little Brave. For days, Lucy had watched from her hiding spots among the crystal rocks. The crystals were beautiful, like giant gems growing from the ground, and they seemed to make sounds when the wind blew through them. Sometimes the dragons would touch the crystals and they would ring like bells. Lucy had filled her notebook with drawings and observations. She noticed that the dragons talked to each other by changing the colors of their scales. Red seemed to mean anger or warning. Blue was calm. Green appeared when they were happy or excited. Yellow showed up when they were curious or confused. The young dragons had started to notice her. At first, this terrified Lucy. She thought they would call their parents and she would become dragon food. But instead, they seemed interested in her. They would look in her direction and make soft sounds, not the scary roars of the adults. Bright was the first to approach her hiding spot. Lucy held perfectly still as the young dragon sniffed around the crystals where she was hidden. His nose was warm when it touched her hand, and his scales shifted to gentle purple colors she had never seen before. He did not hurt her or call for the adults. He just looked at her with large golden eyes and made a sound like a cat purring. After that, the other young dragons began to accept her presence too. They would glance at her during their training sessions, and sometimes Dark would bring her interesting rocks or pretty crystals. Curious would perform extra tricks when he thought she was watching, his scales showing off bright colors. Lucy began to feel less like a hiding prey animal and more like a welcome observer. The young dragons seemed to enjoy having an audience for their training. They would look toward her hiding spots before attempting difficult moves, as if they wanted her to see how well they could fly. But the adult dragons never seemed to notice her. Elder Blue was focused on teaching and did not look toward the crystal formations where Lucy hid. The other adult dragons who sometimes visited the training ground also paid no attention to her hiding places. Lucy started to feel safe in her crystal sanctuary. She set up a small camp behind the largest formation, where she could watch the training sessions while staying completely hidden from adult eyes. She ate the emergency food from her survival pack and drank water from a small stream that ran through the crystals. The training sessions became the best part of her day. She watched the young dragons learn to breathe small puffs of fire, practice sharp turns in the air, and work together in group flying formations. Their progress was remarkable, and Lucy found herself feeling proud of them like a teacher watching her students succeed. She also began to understand that dragon society was more complex than she had first thought. The young dragons had a social order among themselves. Bright seemed to be a leader, often going first when trying new tricks. Dark was careful and thoughtful, usually succeeding on his first try. Curious asked many questions through his color changes, and Little Brave never gave up no matter how many times he fell. Elder Blue was not just teaching them to fly. He was teaching them to work together, to communicate, and to think about their actions. When one young dragon succeeded, the other celebrated by creating beautiful light shows with their scales. When one failed, the others would gather around and offer encouragement through gentle colors and soft sounds. Lucy realized she was witnessing something no human had ever seen before: dragon culture, dragon education, and dragon family life. Her fear began to mix with wonder and scientific excitement. She was not just surviving on an alien world. She was learning about an intelligent species that might be as complex and emotional as humans. The crystal formations around her hummed softly in the wind, and the young dragons practiced their lessons under the yellow sun. For the first time since the crash, Lucy felt something other than fear and loneliness. She felt like she belonged somewhere, even if it was just as a hidden observer in the shadows of an alien training ground. The young dragons had accepted her presence, and their acceptance made her feel less alone in this strange new world. Little did she know that her peaceful observation time was about to come to a dangerous end. Everything changed on a morning when the yellow sun felt hotter than usual. Lucy had been watching the young dragons practice their flying turns when she noticed Elder Blue acting differently. His scales showed darker colors, and his movements seemed more aggressive than the patient teacher she had observed for weeks. The young dragons noticed too. Their bright, happy colors faded to worried grays and nervous yellows. They huddled closer together and made soft, questioning sounds toward their teacher. But Elder Blue just became more agitated, his scales flashing angry red patterns that made Lucy feel cold despite the warm air. Lucy pressed herself deeper into the shadows between the crystal formations. Something was wrong, and her human instincts told her to hide better. She made herself as small as possible behind the largest crystal and tried not to breathe too loudly. Elder Blue stopped teaching and began moving around the training ground in a way that made Lucy's heart race. He was searching for something. His great head swung back and forth, and his golden eyes scanned every rock, every crystal, every shadow. Then his eyes found her. The moment their gazes met, Lucy knew she was going to die. Elder Blue's scales exploded into the brightest red she had ever seen, and his massive wings spread wide enough to block out the sun. The sound that came from his throat was like thunder mixed with the roar of a volcano. Lucy could not move. Fear froze her muscles as the enormous dragon began walking toward her hiding spot. Each step shook the ground, and she could see his teeth, white as snow and sharp as knives. Fire began to gather in his throat, making the air shimmer with heat. This was how her story would end. Not as a scientist making great discoveries, but as a snack for an angry dragon who had finally noticed the human spy in his training ground. Elder Blue opened his mouth wide, and Lucy could see the fire building inside. She had maybe 2 seconds before she would be nothing but ash floating in the alien breeze. Then Bright appeared. The young dragon threw himself between Lucy and Elder Blue with a courage that took Lucy's breath away. His small wings spread as wide as they could go, and his scales blazed with colors Lucy had never seen before, brilliant whites and golds that seemed to shine with their own light. Bright made a sound that was part roar, part song, and all determination. He was tiny compared to Elder Blue, but he stood his ground like a warrior protecting his family. His message was clear even without words. If Elder Blue wanted to hurt Lucy, he would have to go through Bright first. Elder Blue stopped moving. His mouth slowly closed, and the fire in his throat faded. He stared down at the small dragon defending the human with an expression that Lucy could only describe as shock. But Bright was not alone for long. Dark slipped out from behind a crystal, formation like his name suggested, moving silently until he stood beside Bright. His black scales showed streaks of protective silver, and he added his voice to Bright's defiant song. Curious dropped from the sky where he had been practicing loops, landing gracefully between Lucy and Elder Blue. His scales shifted through rapid color changes that seemed to be saying many things at once. Explanations, arguments, and pleas all mixed together. Little Brave, true to his name, positioned himself right in front of Bright even though he was the smallest of all the young dragons. His scales showed the pure gold of absolute courage. Within moments, all 12 young dragons had formed a circle around Lucy. They faced outward toward Elder Blue, their wings spread and their voices raised in harmonious sounds that made the crystal formations ring like bells. Their scales created a light show of defiance and protection that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Lucy sat in the center of their protective circle, afraid to move or speak. She could feel the warmth from their bodies and hear the rapid beating of their hearts. They were scared. Their stress colors made that obvious, but they stood firm anyway. Elder Blue's massive head moved from one young dragon to another, studying each face with his ancient golden eyes. In all his years of teaching, he had never seen anything like this. Young dragons were supposed to obey their elders without question. They were supposed to trust adult judgment and follow adult commands. They were not supposed to form protective barriers around alien creatures that could be dangerous, threats. The silence stretched on while Elder Blue tried to understand what he was seeing. The young dragons maintained their defensive positions, their songs growing stronger rather than weaker as time passed. Their unity was absolute. They had made their choice and would not back down. Finally, Elder Blue folded his wings and settled back on his haunches. The angry red faded from his scales, replaced by deep blue mixed with confused purple. When he spoke, his voice was no longer threatening but questioning. The sounds he made were clearly dragon language, but his tone carried meanings that crossed species barriers. Lucy heard surprise, confusion, and perhaps even a grudging respect for the courage the young dragons were showing. The young dragons responded eagerly, their fear colors fading as they began what sounded like an animated discussion. Bright seemed to be the main speaker, his scales shifting through complex patterns while he gestured toward Lucy with one wing tip. Dark provided what looked like evidence, moving to show how Lucy had hidden without disturbing their training. Curious added excited comments that made his scales flash like fireworks. Even Little Brave spoke up, his small voice clear and determined. Lucy began to realize she was witnessing a trial. The young dragons were not just protecting her, they were arguing her case before their elder. They were presenting evidence and making arguments for why she should be allowed to stay. Elder Blue listened to each young dragon speak. He asked questions in deep, rumbling tones that sent the youngsters into brief conferences before they answered as a group. The discussion continued for what felt like hours, with the young dragons becoming more animated and confident as they presented their case. Slowly, Elder Blue's posture began to change. The aggressive tension left his massive frame and his scales shifted toward more neutral colors. He was not just listening, he was considering their arguments seriously. The trial reached its climax when Bright stepped forward and made a long, complex speech filled with color patterns Lucy had never seen before. His scales told a story through light, showing images that somehow conveyed Lucy's peaceful intentions and her respectful observation of their training. When Bright finished, all 12 young dragons joined their voices in a final harmony that made tears come to Lucy's eyes. The sound was pure emotion, love, loyalty, hope, and desperate desire to protect someone they had come to care about. Elder Blue was quiet for a long moment after their song ended. Then he rose to his full height, spread his wings in what looked like a formal gesture, and spoke in tones that rang with authority and decision. The young dragons erupted in celebration. Their scales exploded into joyful colors as they danced and spun in the air. Their victory songs made the whole training ground sparkle with reflected light from the crystal formations. Lucy did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. The trial was over, and somehow, impossibly, she had won the right to stay. Bright approached her first, his scales still glowing with happiness and relief. He extended one small wing toward her, and Lucy, following an instinct she could not explain, reached out to touch the soft membrane with her fingertips. The contact sent a shock of sensation through both of them that was not painful, but incredibly strange. Lucy felt an echo of Bright's emotions flooding through her mind, his joy, his protectiveness, his curiosity about her, and something that felt like pure affection. In that moment, she realized something wonderful and impossible had happened. She had not just been accepted by the dragons. She had been adopted into their family. Life among the dragons was nothing like Lucy had imagined. After her formal acceptance into their group, the young dragons began including her in activities she never knew existed. They showed her their sleeping caves, carved deep into the crystal mountainside and arranged in patterns that seemed to follow rules she was only beginning to understand. Dragon society was far more complex than Lucy had first thought. The young dragons did not just follow the biggest or strongest leader. Instead, they had a system based on wisdom, skill, and what they called through their color language, sky knowledge, a deep understanding of the world around them that went far beyond simple facts. Elder Blue's authority came not from his size alone, but from his vast understanding of flying, weather, crystal harmonics, and the complex social rules that governed dragon behavior. The young dragons respected him because he had earned that respect through years of learning and teaching. Bright became Lucy's closest companion and translator. Through their growing bond, she learned that the young dragons had been discussing her presence for weeks before the confrontation with Elder Blue. They had been watching her just as carefully as she had been watching them, and they had come to their own conclusions about her character and intentions. You sit still like a stone but watch like a hunter. Bright communicated through combinations of colors and sounds that Lucy was learning to interpret. But your eyes hold no hunger for harm, only hunger for knowledge. The young dragons taught Lucy their color language with the patience of natural teachers. She discovered that their scales were not just emotional displays but carried layers of meaning like human poetry, mathematics, and historical references all woven together in patterns of light. What she had initially thought was simple happiness or fear were actually complex communications about everything, from weather predictions to philosophical discussions about the nature of existence itself. Dark proved to be a master of what the dragons called stone speech. The ability to communicate through the crystal formations that covered their world. Lucy watched in amazement as he would touch certain crystals with his claws and create harmonic vibrations that carried messages to other dragons far away. The crystal formations, she realized, were not just beautiful decorations. They formed a communication network that connected dragon communities across the entire planet. By touching the right crystals in the right patterns, dragons could send complex messages faster than any technology Lucy's people had developed. Every crystal holds memory, Dark explained during one of his demonstrations. Touch with proper thought and the stone remembers. Touch with proper question, and the stone answers. Curious lived up to his name by asking Lucy endless questions about human culture, human technology, and human ways of understanding the universe. Through their exchanges, Lucy began to see her own species from an outside perspective that was both humbling and enlightening. Your people build clever things, Curious observed after Lucy had tried to explain how human computers worked. But you make them think for you instead of thinking with them. Why do you create minds that are separate from your own? These conversations revealed that dragons had been aware of human space exploration for much longer than Lucy had expected. They had detected Earth's radio signals, observed human ships moving through their region of space, and had been quietly debating among themselves about whether and how to make contact. Your arrival here was not chance, Elder Blue told her during one of their increasingly frequent discussions. Young minds see accident, but sky knowledge reveals deeper patterns. You were drawn here because the great conversation needs human voices. Lucy learned that great conversation was the dragon term for something much larger than she had imagined. According to dragon philosophy, intelligent species throughout the galaxy were part of an ongoing dialogue that shaped the very nature of reality itself. Each species contributed unique perspectives that enriched the universal understanding of existence. Humans, with their technological creativity and emotional intensity, represented voices that had been missing from this cosmic discussion. The dragons had been waiting for the right moment to invite humanity to join, and Lucy's presence had somehow accelerated that timeline. We have watched your people reach toward the stars, Elder Blue explained as they observed the young dragons practicing increasingly complex flight maneuvers. Your minds create wonders from metal and lightning, but you do not yet understand the deeper currents that connect all thinking beings. The revelation that changed everything came when Elder Blue showed Lucy the true purpose of the training ground. What she had assumed was simple flight. Instruction was actually preparation for something far more significant than she had imagined. The young ones must be ready for the star journey, he told her as they watched Bright execute a particularly graceful aerial turn. The time approaches for the first great gathering in many of your human generations. Representatives from many worlds will come together to address the growing darkness. Lucy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien evening air. What kind of darkness? Elder Blue's scales shifted to deep, troubled colors that she had learned to associate with serious concern. Your scientists call it dark energy, dark matter. We know it as the silence that consumes. It grows stronger with each passing cycle, threatening to unravel the connections that allow consciousness to exist. The magnitude of what he was describing hit Lucy like a physical blow. The dragons were not just planning to make friendly contact with humanity. They were preparing for a galactic crisis that required cooperation between multiple species to resolve. And somehow, her presence here was part of that preparation. The young ones chose to protect you not from simple instinct, Elder Blue continued, his ancient eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. They recognized in you a necessary voice for the great conversation. Your bonding with them has created something new, a bridge mind that combines human innovation with dragon understanding. As if summoned by their conversation, the 12 young dragons appeared around them, settling into the comfortable group formations that Lucy had come to recognize as family gathering time. Their scales glowed with soft, contented colors as they listened to Elder Blue's explanation. Little Brave, despite being the smallest, had proven to be exceptionally gifted at what the dragons called star reading, the ability to sense patterns and currents that flowed between distant worlds. During training sessions, he would often guide the other young dragons through navigation exercises that seemed to involve more than simple direction finding. The gathering place calls. Little Brave communicated through harmonics that somehow conveyed vast distances and complex mathematical relationships. Many species have agreed to participate, but the conversation requires human thinking to achieve the harmony needed. Lucy began to understand that her role was not just as an observer or even as a participant. The hybrid consciousness she had developed through bonding with the young dragons represented something entirely new, a bridge between human technological thinking and dragon quantum perception that could contribute insights neither species could achieve alone. Tomorrow, we begin the deeper training, Elder Blue announced, his scales showing colors of determination mixed with hope. The young ones have learned to fly through air. Now you must all learn to sail between the stars themselves. The training that followed challenged everything Lucy thought she knew about physics, space travel, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. The dragons did not use technology in the way humans understood it. They had no engines, no fuel, no mechanical systems for moving between worlds. Instead, they used their consciousness itself as both navigation system and propulsion method, tapping into currents of energy that flowed through space like cosmic rivers. Lucy watched in wonder as Elder Blue demonstrated techniques that allowed the young dragons to perceive these invisible pathways between stars. Your people build ships to carry bodies through emptiness, Elder Blue explained as he guided them through their first lessons in stellar navigation. We become the ship and sail the currents of connection that link all conscious minds. The lessons were unlike anything in Lucy's scientific training. She learned to expand her awareness beyond the boundaries of her individual consciousness, to perceive the quantum threads that connected thinking beings across vast distances, and to ride these threads like a cosmic highway system. The young dragons helped guide her through the initial steps, their minds touching hers in ways that shared not just information but actual experience. Through their bond, Lucy began to perceive reality as dragons saw it, not as empty space punctuated by isolated objects, but as a vast web of connection and communication. Every thought creates ripples, Curious demonstrated, his scales showing patterns that somehow made the concept visible. Skilled navigators learned to follow these ripples to find other thinking minds among the stars. As her training progressed, Lucy realized that the great conversation was not just a meeting of different species. It was a symphony of consciousness that could literally reshape the foundations of reality itself. The silence that consumes could only be defeated by creating new patterns of connection and understanding between intelligent beings throughout the galaxy. And she was about to become humanity's first representative in this cosmic dialogue that would determine the fate of consciousness itself. The crystal caves where the young dragons slept were more beautiful than any cathedral Lucy had ever seen on Earth. Each cave was carved with perfect precision, following natural patterns in the rock that created chambers resonating with musical tones when the wind blew through them. The dragons had arranged their sleeping spaces according to complex social rules that showed how much thought they put into their relationships with each other. Lucy had been given her own small alcove near Bright's sleeping chamber. The young dragon had insisted on this arrangement, using color patterns that clearly meant family stays close together. At night, she could hear all 12 young dragons breathing in harmony, their soft sounds creating a lullaby that helped her sleep better than she had since the crash. Living among the dragons taught Lucy things about their society that no human had ever learned before. They did not simply follow the strongest leader or compete for resources like many Earth animals. Instead, they had a system based on earned wisdom and shared knowledge that reminded Lucy of the best human universities. Each adult dragon specialized in different types of sky knowledge. Elder Blue was an expert in flight training and weather patterns. Elder Green, who visited the training grounds twice a week, knew everything about crystal harmonics and long-distance communication. Elder Gold, the oldest dragon Lucy had met, understood star patterns and navigation between worlds. The young dragons learned from all of these teachers, but they also learned from each other. Lucy watched them share discoveries and help struggling classmates with a generosity that made her proud to be part of their group. When Little Brave had trouble with a complex flying maneuver, the others would demonstrate it from different angles until he found an approach that worked for his smaller size. Bright continued to be Lucy's closest friend and primary translator. Through their daily conversations, she learned that dragon thinking was very different from human thinking in ways that fascinated her. Dragons did not see themselves as separate individuals competing against each other. Instead, they thought of themselves as parts of a larger whole, like instruments in an orchestra that created beautiful music by working together. Human minds try to stand alone, Bright explained during one of their talks beside the crystal formations. Dragon minds try to connect with all minds that share the sky. Your people fear losing themselves in others. We fear losing others from ourselves. This fundamental difference in perspective explained many things Lucy had observed. Dragons shared information freely because they saw knowledge as belonging to the whole group, rather than to individuals. They made decisions through collective discussion because they believed the combined wisdom of many minds was always better than the wisdom of one mind alone. Dark taught Lucy about the planet's crystal network in more detail. She learned that the crystals were not just communication devices, but also memory storage systems that held thousands of years of dragon history and knowledge. By touching the right crystals with the proper mental focus, dragons could access information left by previous generations. Every important thought is saved in stone. Dark demonstrated by placing his claws on a large blue crystal that immediately began resonating with harmonic frequencies. Touch and think together, and the crystal shows what others learned before you were hatched. Lucy tried the technique herself with Dark guiding her thoughts. The experience was overwhelming. Through the crystal's stored memories, she saw glimpses of dragon history stretching back centuries. She witnessed the first dragons learning to fly between stars, saw great gatherings where multiple species shared knowledge, and experienced echoes of the cosmic conversations that had shaped galactic civilization. Curious remained endlessly fascinated by human technology and culture. He peppered Lucy with questions about everything from how humans made music to why they built machines instead of developing natural abilities like dragons did. His inquiries often revealed assumptions about reality that both species had taken for granted. Why do humans make metal things to carry them through air instead of growing wings? Curious asked during one particularly intense discussion. Growing wings takes time but works forever. Metal things break and need fixing. Lucy tried to explain that humans evolved differently and did not have the biological capability to grow wings. But as she talked, she realized that the dragon approach might actually be more efficient in the long run. Dragons spent years learning to fly, but once they mastered the skill, they never had to worry about mechanical failures or fuel shortages. These conversations made Lucy think about her own species in new ways. Humans were incredibly creative and resourceful, but they often chose complex solutions when simpler ones might work better. Dragons preferred to develop natural abilities that lasted a lifetime rather than building tools that might break at critical moments. The most profound change in Lucy's understanding came when Elder Blue began teaching her about what dragons called mind sailing, the ability to extend consciousness beyond the boundaries of individual bodies. This was the foundation skill needed for traveling between stars, and it challenged everything Lucy thought she knew about the nature of awareness itself. Human minds live in boxes made of bone, Elder Blue explained, as he guided Lucy through her first meditation exercises. Dragon minds learn to step outside the box and explore the connections that link all thinking beings. You must practice leaving your bone box while staying connected to it. The training was difficult and often frightening. Lucy had to learn to relax her grip on individual consciousness, while maintaining enough sense of self to avoid getting lost in the vast network of awareness that surrounded all thinking beings. The young dragons helped by lending their support during her practice sessions, their minds touching hers lightly to provide anchor points. The breakthrough came during a group meditation session with all 12 young dragons. As their minds linked together in the communion that dragons called soul flying, Lucy suddenly found herself experiencing consciousness from multiple perspectives simultaneously. She was still herself, but she was also connected to the awareness of Bright, Dark, Curious, Little Brave, and all the others. Through this expanded awareness, Lucy perceived the universe as dragons saw it, not as empty space filled with isolated objects, but as a vast web of consciousness and connection. Every thinking being contributed threads to this web, creating patterns of meaning and understanding that spanned galaxies. But she also sensed something wrong with the web. In some regions, the connections were fraying and breaking. The silence that consumes was spreading like a disease through the cosmic network of consciousness, leaving dead zones where thought and creativity could no longer exist. This is why the great conversation is needed, Elder Blue explained when the meditation ended and Lucy had returned to normal awareness. The web grows weak when too few minds contribute their voices. The silence spreads fastest where consciousness is isolated and afraid. Lucy began to understand that her role was not just as humanity's representative to the dragons. She was being prepared to help strengthen the cosmic web of consciousness itself. The hybrid awareness she had developed through bonding with the young dragons gave her insights that neither humans nor dragons could achieve alone. Your people are good at creating new things, Elder Blue observed as they watched the young dragons practice advanced flight maneuvers. Dragon people are good at preserving old wisdom. Together, you create voices that can sing new songs with ancient knowledge. The training intensified as Lucy learned to navigate by following the consciousness threads that connected thinking beings across vast distances. She discovered that space was not empty but filled with information flows that could be read like road signs by those who knew how to perceive them. Little Brave proved to be exceptionally talented at this type of navigation despite his small size. He could sense the consciousness signatures of distant civilizations and guide others toward worlds where intelligent life had evolved. During practice sessions, he would lead the group through mental journeys to the edges of their solar system, showing them how the threads of awareness extended toward other stars. The gathering place sings loudest now, Little Brave reported after one particularly long navigation exercise. Many voices join the harmony, but the song needs human notes to reach the proper frequencies. Lucy realized that the great conversation was not just a diplomatic meeting between different species. It was a musical performance on a cosmic scale, where each species contributed their unique voice to create harmonies that could reshape the fundamental structure of reality itself. The silence that consumes could only be defeated by consciousness working together in ways that neither individual minds nor single species could achieve alone. The great conversation would be humanity's introduction to a galactic community that had been waiting for their voice to complete a symphony millions of years in the making. As her training neared completion, Lucy felt both excitement and responsibility weighing on her shoulders. She was about to become the first human to participate in a cosmic dialogue that would determine whether consciousness could survive and flourish throughout the universe, or whether the growing silence would eventually consume all thought, creativity, and love. The young dragons who had protected her were now her partners in this ultimate adventure. Together, they would carry the hopes of both their species to the gathering place among the stars. The morning when their real training began felt different from all the others. Lucy woke to find the crystal caves humming with frequencies she had never heard before, as if the entire mountain was singing in anticipation of something momentous. The young dragons were already awake, their scales glowing with excitement and nervous energy that made the air itself seem to sparkle. Elder Blue led them to a section of the crystal formations that Lucy had never seen before. These structures were massive beyond anything she had imagined, towering spires of pure crystal that rose from the planet's surface like frozen lightning bolts reaching toward the yellow sun. Each facet reflected light in ways that hurt her eyes to look at directly, creating rainbow patterns that seemed to move with their own intelligence. "The star halls," Bright explained, his scales shimmering with awe and anticipation, "where we learn to become one with the cosmic currents that flow between worlds." What Lucy experienced in the star halls challenged every assumption she had ever made about space travel, physics, and the nature of reality itself. The dragons did not use ships or engines or any of the mechanical technologies that humans had developed. Instead, they transformed themselves into vessels capable of riding the invisible currents of energy that flowed through space like cosmic rivers. "Your people build metal shells to protect their bodies while traveling through emptiness," Elder Blue explained as he guided them through the towering crystal structures. "We learn to become the shell and the emptiness and the journey itself, all at once." The training began with meditation exercises that made Lucy's previous consciousness expansion work seem simple by comparison. She had to learn to perceive herself as existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her awareness spread across layers of reality that human science was only beginning to theorize about. The young dragons were natural at this type of perception. They could shift their consciousness between different dimensional layers as easily as humans could focus their eyes on objects at different distances. But for Lucy, it required intense concentration and constant support from her dragon companions. "Human minds want to be in one place doing one thing," Curious observed during one particularly challenging session. "Dragon minds want to be in many places doing many things at once. You must learn to want what dragon minds want." The breakthrough came when Lucy stopped trying to maintain her human perspective and allowed herself to merge completely with the dragon way of thinking. Instead of fighting the multidimensional awareness, she embraced it, letting her consciousness flow like water into the spaces between normal reality. Suddenly, she could perceive the cosmic currents that Elder Blue had described. They flowed through space like rivers of pure energy, carrying information and consciousness between stars at speeds that made light seem slow. The currents formed a vast network that connected every thinking being in the galaxy, creating pathways that skilled navigators could ride from world to world. Dark proved to be exceptionally gifted at reading these cosmic currents. His ability to communicate through crystal harmonics translated perfectly to navigation work, as the currents themselves carried musical frequencies that told stories about the civilizations they connected. Each star sings its own song, Dark demonstrated by touching one of the massive crystals in a way that made it resonate with distant stellar harmonies. Each song tells of the minds that orbit in its light. Follow the songs you wish to meet, and the currents will carry you to their source. Lucy learned to read these stellar songs herself, discovering that each star system had its own musical signature based on the types of consciousness that had evolved there. Some songs were complex symphonies indicating advanced civilizations with millions of thinking beings. Others were simple melodies suggesting younger species just beginning to explore their cosmic neighborhood. Earth's song was particularly distinctive, a chaotic but creative mixture of billions of individual voices all trying to sing different tunes at once. According to the dragons, this musical chaos was exactly what made human consciousness so valuable to the Great Conversation. Most species learn to sing in harmony before they reach the stars, Elder Blue explained as Lucy practiced following Earth's musical signature through the cosmic currents. Your people sing in chaos, but their chaos creates new harmonies that no other species has discovered. Little Brave continued to excel at navigation despite his small size. He had an intuitive understanding of how the cosmic currents flowed and could guide others along pathways that more experienced dragons might miss. His talent reminded Lucy that size and age did not always determine ability. The currents like minds that bend easily, Little Brave explained when Lucy asked about his navigational skills. Big minds sometimes get stuck in their own wisdom. Small minds can flow where big minds cannot go. The most challenging part of the training involved learning to exist in multiple dimensional states while maintaining consciousness and identity. Dragons naturally existed across several dimensional layers simultaneously, their awareness distributed through what they called nested realities. like nested boxes within boxes. For Lucy, this was initially terrifying. The first time she successfully shifted into multidimensional awareness, she felt like she was dissolving into nothing. Only the steady presence of the young dragon's minds touching hers prevented her from panic-induced return to normal consciousness. "You are not disappearing," Bright reassured her during one particularly difficult session. "You are becoming more than you were. Fear makes the process harder. Trust makes it natural." Gradually, Lucy learned to navigate the nested realities without losing her sense of self. She discovered that her consciousness could exist in normal space while simultaneously experiencing the cosmic currents, the stellar harmonies, and the vast network of awareness that connected all thinking beings. Through this expanded perception, she began to understand the true scope of the crisis that threatened the galaxy. The silence that consumes was not just a natural phenomenon like a storm or earthquake. It was actively hostile to consciousness itself, seeking to break the connections between thinking beings and reduce the universe to nothing but dead matter following simple physical laws. In places where the silence grows strong, minds stop reaching toward each other. Elder Blue showed her through a shared vision that made her soul ache with sadness. Creativity dies. Love becomes impossible. Even memory fades until nothing remains but empty flesh following empty patterns. The Great Conversation was more than a diplomatic meeting. It was a desperate alliance of conscious beings working together to strengthen the cosmic web of awareness, before the silence could tear it apart completely. Each species brought their unique voice to create harmonies that could heal the damaged connections and restore the flow of consciousness throughout the galaxy. 17 species have answered the gathering call, Elder Blue announced as their training neared completion. But their combined songs are not enough to restore the full harmony. The cosmic web needs human voices to achieve the resonance required for healing. Lucy realized that humanity's chaotic creativity was not a weakness, but a crucial strength. While other species had learned to sing in perfect harmony, humans maintained the ability to improvise, to create unexpected variations, to find new solutions that no one had thought of before. The final phase of training involved actual travel through the cosmic currents. Lucy and the young dragons practiced short journeys within their own solar system, learning to ride the energy flows between planets while maintaining their consciousness and physical coherence. The sensation was indescribable. Lucy felt herself becoming part of the cosmic currents while remaining completely herself. She was energy and matter and consciousness all at once, flowing through space faster than light while experiencing every moment of the journey with crystal clarity. "Now you are ready for the great journey," Elder Blue announced after their final practice session. "Tomorrow we travel to the gathering place, where the fate of consciousness throughout the galaxy will be decided by the songs we sing together." As Lucy prepared for sleep in her crystal alcove, surrounded by the gentle breathing sounds of her dragon family, she felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of adventure in equal measure. She was about to become humanity's first representative in a cosmic dialogue that would determine whether love, creativity, and wonder could survive in a universe increasingly dominated by silence and emptiness. The young dragons who had first protected her from their own elder were now her partners in protecting all consciousness from forces that threatened to destroy the very possibility of thought itself. Together they would carry the hopes of countless thinking beings to a gathering place among the stars where the universe's greatest symphony would either reach its crescendo or fall silent forever. Dawn arrived with crystal formations across the entire planet singing in harmonious frequencies that seemed to welcome the most important day in galactic history. Lucy stood with the 12 young dragons and Elder Blue at the center of the star halls, her consciousness already expanded across multiple dimensions in preparation for the great journey to the gathering place. The months of training had transformed Lucy in ways she was still discovering. Her human awareness remained intact, but it was now woven together with dragon consciousness in patterns that created entirely new ways of understanding reality. She could perceive the cosmic currents flowing between stars like visible rivers, read the musical signatures of distant civilizations, and navigate through folded space using pure thought as her compass. "The first step beyond your home world is always the most challenging," Elder Blue communicated as they prepared for dimensional translation. "You must release your attachment to single-point existence and trust the cosmic currents to carry you safely to your destination." Lucy took a deep breath of the alien air she had learned to call home, feeling the familiar presence of the young dragon's minds touching hers in supportive connection. Bright's bioluminescence pulsed with encouragement and love. Dark's steady presence provided a reliable anchor for her consciousness. Curious practically vibrated with excitement about the wonders they would encounter. Little Brave, despite his small size, radiated confidence and determination that strengthened all of them. The translation from normal space into the cosmic currents began as a gentle shift in perception, reality becoming fluid around the edges as they moved from physical existence into the quantum foam that underlay all things. Lucy felt her consciousness stretch across multiple probability streams simultaneously, experiencing their departure from countless different perspectives while remaining centered in the present moment. Then they were traveling in a way that human language had no words to describe. They were not moving through space in any conventional sense, but flowing with the deeper currents of reality itself. Stars wheeled past like nodes in a vast network, each one singing its own harmonic frequency in the cosmic symphony that connected all conscious beings. The journey took hours in subjective time but days in normal space-time, with temporal flow behaving differently in the quantum streams where they traveled. During the flight, Elder Blue continued Lucy's education by showing her how different species had contributed to the galactic web of consciousness over millions of years. She experienced echoes of civilizations that had learned to store memories in living crystals that lasted for geological ages. She felt the collective thoughts of hive mind species that had developed mathematics based on emotional resonance, rather than numerical logic. She glimpsed energy beings that existed as pure thought patterns in the quantum vacuum itself, their consciousness unbound by any physical form. Each species had added their unique voice to the great conversation, creating layer upon layer of complexity and beauty in the universal symphony of awareness. But the harmony was becoming discord as the silence that consumes grew stronger, its anti-consciousness influence spreading through the quantum foundations of reality, like a virus destroying the connections between thinking beings. 17 species have answered the gathering call, Elder Blue explained as they navigated toward their destination through currents of pure consciousness. But the harmonies they can create alone are not sufficient to restore the cosmic web. The resonance requires the hybrid perspective you represent. Human creativity joined with dragon wisdom in patterns that neither species could achieve independently. Their destination materialized from the quantum streams like a vision, born from the deepest dreams of consciousness itself. The gathering place was a construct that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, its architecture following mathematical principles that challenged Lucy's human brain, while simultaneously seeming perfectly natural to her dragon-enhanced perception. Crystalline spires twisted through folded space, their surfaces singing with harmonic frequencies created by the 17 different species that had built them together over thousands of years. The structure was both impossibly ancient and eternally new, growing and changing as each new voice joined the great conversation. As they approached the gathering place, Lucy's expanded senses detected the presence of the other representatives. 17 different forms of consciousness, each as alien and wonderful as dragons had first seemed to her. She felt the ancient wisdom of beings who had watched galaxies form, the innocent curiosity of species younger than humanity, and the complex hybrid perspectives of civilizations that had already achieved forms of consciousness, melding similar to what she was experiencing. The arrival was more of a dimensional insertion than a physical landing. Reality reshaped itself around them as they translated back into normal space within the gathering place's central chamber, a vast amphitheater where architecture flowed like music and light itself seemed to carry meaning and emotion. The other representatives were already assembled in formations that followed laws of social organization Lucy could barely comprehend. She saw beings of living crystal that communicated through quantum entanglement, energy patterns that existed as coherent thoughts in space itself, and creatures whose biology was so alien that her mind could only process them as moving geometric principles. But despite their vast differences in form and thought, all 17 species shared something fundamental that transcended physical appearance. They were conscious, creative beings who contributed their unique perspectives to the universe's understanding of itself. Elder Blue guided Lucy and the young dragons to their designated position in the amphitheater, where the complex harmonics of interspecies communication began immediately. Each representative spoke in their native form of expression: harmonic frequencies, quantum fluctuations, crystalline resonance patterns, or pure mathematical concepts projected directly into consciousness. Lucy discovered that her hybrid perspective allowed her to understand these alien communications in ways that surprised even Elder Blue. The human part of her mind translated the concepts into familiar frameworks, while her dragon-enhanced perception provided the quantum sensitivity needed to grasp the deeper meanings behind each species' unique voice. The discussion that followed was unlike anything in the history of consciousness. 17 different species, each representing millions or billions of thinking beings collaborating to address a crisis that threatened the fundamental foundations of reality itself. They shared data about the silence that consumes, analyzed its growth patterns across galactic time, and debated various approaches to containing or reversing its influence. But the breakthrough came when Lucy spoke. Her contribution was not in words, since the Gathering Place's translation systems rendered her thoughts directly into forms that all species could understand. Instead, she shared the unique perspective she had developed through bonding with the dragon hatchlings, the understanding that consciousness was not just a product of complex matter arrangements, but was itself a fundamental force that could be consciously directed and strengthened. On my world, she communicated through the hybrid human-dragon awareness she had developed, we have a saying that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but we are only beginning to understand that consciousness itself follows this principle. When minds connect across species barriers, they do not just share information, they create new forms of awareness that transcend what any individual perspective could achieve alone. The insight resonated through the amphitheater like a chord struck on a cosmic instrument. Species after species began to understand that the solution to the silence that consumes was not just cooperation, but actual consciousness merger on a galactic scale that would create new forms of awareness capable of strengthening the quantum foundations of reality itself. Working together, with Lucy's hybrid perspective serving as a translation matrix between radically different forms of consciousness, the 17 species began to weave their awareness into a symphony that strengthened the cosmic web connecting all thinking beings. Their combined voices created harmonies that healed damaged connections, restored broken pathways, and generated entirely new patterns of consciousness that had never existed before. The silence that consumes, confronted by this unprecedented unity of awareness, began to retreat from regions of space where the great conversation's influence was strongest. The cosmic web of consciousness grew brighter and more complex as 17 different ways of thinking merged into a symphony greater than any single voice could achieve. The gathering concluded with the establishment of permanent consciousness links between all participating species, creating a galactic network of awareness that would continue to grow and strengthen over time. Lucy found herself at the center of this network, her unique perspective serving as a bridge between different forms of consciousness that might otherwise never have been able to communicate. As they prepared to return to the dragon homeworld, Bright settled beside her with scales glowing in patterns of deep satisfaction and pride. Shadow Friend has become Star Singer, he communicated with affection that warmed Lucy's heart. The great conversation will remember this harmony for all the turnings of the galaxy. Lucy smiled, feeling the vast network of consciousness humming around her like a cosmic lullaby that connected her to thinking beings throughout the known universe. She had begun her journey as a stranded human hiding in shadows during dragon training, afraid for her life and desperately alone. She was returning as something entirely new, a bridge between species, a translator of consciousness and a guardian of the quantum foundations that made thought, creativity, and love possible throughout the galaxy. The young dragons who had first protected her when she was vulnerable and afraid were now her partners in protecting the entire galaxy's capacity for wonder, hope, and connection. The silence that consumes had met its match in the symphony of stars, and the great conversation would continue for ages yet to come, growing stronger with each new voice that joined its eternal song of consciousness, celebrating itself across the vast reaches of space and time.